What's happening, guys? Johnny with Rules for Rebels, and just kind of got a funny story to share with you guys today. The story doesn't actually involve me, and involves a family friend, but as you saw from the title, this video is called Invested $150,000 into Bitcoin. So yesterday, it was Sunday, Bears game was on. My parents were having over my aunt, my uncle, and my grandparents. So I went over there to watch the game, just relax with some family on Sunday, have some appetizers and stuff. And when I got over there, my dad was telling me, we were sitting on a couch, my dad said, Mr. So-and-so said he talked to you a couple years back, and he was impressed with the conversation he had with you, and he decided to invest in Bitcoin. And I thought, well, this is kind of interesting, right? And this is probably going back to late 2014, early 2015, and I think I remember the dinner. It was, my sister had gotten married back then, and we had like the rehearsal dinner the night before. And this gentleman, his daughter grew up with my sister, so he's been a family friend for years. And what's kind of a little bit off topic, what was kind of funny is back when I was younger, teenager, even into my late teens, early 20s, I used to get in a lot of trouble, and it was kind of like known amongst, obviously it was like no secret to everybody. So I thought it was kind of funny that this guy who I hadn't seen since I was a teenager, when I was kind of a big screw up, was like taking my advice. Obviously a lot of years has passed, I've kind of straightened myself out, and I kind of got some good stuff going for myself nowadays, but just nonetheless, and in my head that kind of stuck out as kind of a weird thing. But I guess he said, he had a discussion with me about Bitcoin. He was kind of really impressed, not only with Bitcoin, but with kind of how I explained Bitcoin to him and everything I had to say. And so he decided to invest in Bitcoin. And I guess he was telling my dad, he's like, no, I invested a lot of money. And I guess my dad was like, oh, would you? No, he's like, no, a lot of money. Turns out he invested $150,000. I mean, $150,000 is a lot of money, right? And here's the thing, though. He didn't invest in Bitcoin. He invested in GBTC. Now, what GBTC is, I guess technically it's not an ETF, although essentially it's an ETF. Currently, there are no Bitcoin ETFs. Obviously, the Winklevoss twins have tried, I believe, twice to bring forward an ETF. The SEC both times said Bitcoin isn't regulated, which Bitcoin hopefully will never be regulated. Like, most people think of that as a positive, not a negative, but that's one of the things they issued in their statement in terms of why they won't approve a Bitcoin ETF. They said, A, it's not regulated, B, it's too volatile, and C, it's not a mature enough market, right? The market, in the grand scheme of things, some markets have been going on for 70 years, 80 years, even 100 years maybe. Bitcoin's been around since 2009. I think the ETF was a year or two ago, so even a couple of years less under its belt. So anyhow, that's the reason they gave for not allowing an ETF. So I guess this GBTC is a private fund. I'd heard about it before, I was aware of it. Basically what it does, it allows people to use like retirement accounts and things like that to invest in Bitcoin, whereas you may not be able to invest in physical Bitcoins through like traditional retirement account type things. Now, I never realized that GBTC was an accredited investment, and what an accredited investment is, it means you have to either have $1 million in net worth, or you have to make $300,000 per year as a single person. I forget as a married person if that number goes up or down, but a lot of people complain, and total side note here, a lot of people complain about accredited investor rules, that they're like meant to keep the little guy or Joe Blow, average person, from getting involved in good investment opportunities. These rules are kind of outdated. They date back to like Depression era times, and I guess basically it was to prevent stupid little people like you and me from getting swindled by investment. So if an investment isn't like registered with the SEC and isn't like approved and accredited, they don't trust us to be smart enough with our money to not get involved in scams and stuff. So they're kind of trying to protect us from ourselves. Like I said, a lot of people argue that these are kind of outdated rules and things like that. You are starting to see investments where the little guy can get in, maybe to a smaller extent. So a while back, I'd invested in Social Blue Book. Social Blue Book is very similar to like FameBit, which was acquired by Google. Social Blue Book is actually tied into the back end of YouTube. Some of you guys who are YouTubers may have seen it before. It basically gives stats about where you rank as a YouTuber and things like that. It'll give kind of estimates or suggestions in terms of, if you're a YouTube creator, based on your stats and view time and stuff, here's what like a shout out or an advertisement or a sponsorship of you is worth. And then they also help to like pair creators with brands. So that's what it is. I bought into it. I think you didn't have to be an accredited investor, but you could only invest either 10% of your net worth or 10% of your yearly income. So I think I put like $3 grand into it. looking back, do I wish I would have done it or not? I don't really know. I guess my thinking was that, like, hey, FameBit got bought out by Google. I think Social Blue Book is as good, if not better, than FameBit, so I invested in it. But we're kind of getting sidetracked here. Anyhow, GBTC, I guess, is an accredited investment vehicle, so this guy has to have some money to be able to invest in it. I personally am not an accredited investor. Anyhow, he invested in GBTC, $150,000. Now, what GBTC aims to do, it's kind of like an index fund. It aims to track the growth of Bitcoin. Now, I'll be honest, I haven't followed it that much. I briefly took a look at it before I made this YouTube video. I want to say it opened up trading at, like, I don't know, 150, 200 bucks. I didn't even zoom in on the chart, so I may be off. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong. But this is back in like 2015. Today, the fund's trading at like $600 and something, right? So that's a pretty good gain, right? To like triple up on your money. However, when you compare that to Bitcoin, which back around that same period was at like $550 and is now at $6,300, it hasn't done a great job of tracking Bitcoin, right? And I guess that was one of my dad's friends' complaints about it. He was like, look, it doesn't really accurately track the progress of Bitcoin. So I think that's probably one of the reasons he eventually did get out of it. But I think that's one of the reasons he got out of it. And he also said, man, I can't sleep. You know, he's like, the thing was going up and down. I held it for a couple months. I couldn't sleep, so I finally had to dump it. Well, I was just looking at the charts, and obviously he invested in GBTC, that 150,000, total inaccurate numbers here, but I'm guessing it probably would have been maybe five or 600,000 now had he held on to it. However, had he actually invested in Bitcoin, again, just doing some rough math, I don't remember the exact dates, but had he invested that $150,000 in Bitcoin, and assuming he held on to it, obviously there's a lot of stories of people who are like, oh, I spent 100 Bitcoin on a pizza or a Newegg gift card or whatever else. You know, everybody who's been in Bitcoin since the early days has a story about how they could have had all this money. So I realize this is kind of silly talking about this, but nonetheless, it's kind of fun to do. So had he bought Bitcoin back then, I think he would have gotten 300 Bitcoins. I did the math earlier this morning. I'm still kind of sleepy. So excuse me if I'm wrong on this. But basically, after doing the math off that $150,000, he would have made about $1,850,000 off of that $150,000 investment. And again, that's assuming that he would have held it through the huge gains up until like the current high price of $6,300. So would he have done that? Wouldn't he? You know, who knows? He probably wouldn't have held all of it that time. But I just thought it was kind of funny. You know, I try to be kind of an ambassador to Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, kind of an evangelist, but at the same time, I try not to be like one of those annoying people. Like, I support crypto, and I even find it annoying, like those people who, like, that's the only thing that comes out of their mouth is Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. I mean, you guys have probably seen it, like on a Shopify Reddit forum or something. Somebody's like, why aren't people growing, you know, why aren't people buying on my Shopify store? How can I grow my Shopify store? And there's always that one guy who's like, you need to take Bitcoin. Like accepting Bitcoin is really going to skyrocket this guy's Shopify store. So I try not to be one of these people who's like a total fanboy and is bringing it up at every moment. Although my girlfriend might agree. She likes to joke that, like, anytime Bitcoin comes up and I'm talking to somebody, she's like, oh my God, we hear this again. You know, she's like, that's the only thing Johnny ever talks about is Bitcoin. But you know, in all reality, I try not to be like one of these fanboys shoving it down everybody's throat. However, if the topic of Bitcoin and cryptos comes up, or if people start talking investments, I will try to kind of shuffle it into the conversation. And I do try to kind of encourage people to take a look at it. And I typically encourage people to a lower extent. One of my girlfriend's friends who doesn't really have any retirement savings or anything else going on, I encouraged her the other week. I was like, look, man, just take like $5 or $10 from every paycheck and throw it into Bitcoin and treat it like a savings account. You're going to save your money, and you know, my personal feeling is over time that money is going to grow. A while back, I've talked about this a little bit. I haven't made a dedicated video for it, but I've been involved in Bitcoin since like 2013. My dad has, you know, never gotten into it, but always kind of asked me, hey, how's that Bitcoin thing going, right? And I'd always kind of give him updates and tell him. And more recently, as it's been kind of getting some mainstream traction and kind of being taken more seriously by like institutional investors and things like that, bankers, etc. My dad was like, you know, I'm thinking I might get involved in this. And I think this is back when Bitcoin was like $2,000. He's like, you know, I got some money sitting in my retirement account, not really doing anything. He's like, I'm thinking about putting $50,000 into Bitcoin. And I actually kind of encouraged him not to do it. I was like, you know, I'm like, maybe take 5 or 10. I'm like, I don't really know about 50. And he was kind of adamant about it. I'm like, no, you know, I knew if it went down, he'd be freaking out. So I'm like, let's do something small. Anyhow, you know, time kind of passed. He never really got into it. And then more recently, as the price was at maybe 4,500, he asked me about it again. I was like, look, why don't I get you one Bitcoin? You can play around with it and kind of see what you think. And at the time, I was actually getting Bitcoin for $200 or $300 under market value. I have a buddy who has a website which trades like game skins. I'm not really a gamer, so I don't know too much about this, but like CSGO skins and guns and things like that. People can trade those for Bitcoin, and then there's like a marketplace for them. So he makes a little bit of a vig, or makes a little percentage off all the transactions that go on in this marketplace. So he gets a lot of, essentially quote unquote free Bitcoins, or Bitcoins that he's getting just from running this website that he's not really buying. So he normally gives me a deal on them just to move them. So he'll give me Bitcoins for, $2, $3, sometimes as much as $600 under market value. So when Bitcoin was at 4,500, I got my dad a Bitcoin at 4,300. It was kind of funny. Shortly after that, Bitcoin went from, I should say, I think Bitcoin went from like 4,500 up to almost $5,000, and then it tanked, right? That's when I think China banned, or not banned, but whatever, halted Bitcoin exchanges. Bitcoin went down to like $3,200, $3,300, and my dad was like, "Oh my God, Johnny, what'd you get me into?" And I was like, "Look, man," I'm like, "you're the one that was telling me you wanted to put $50,000 into this." I said, "You got one Bitcoin," and then he was kind of joking. "Oh, obviously not going to go broke over one Bitcoin," but he's like, if me and your mom go broke, we're moving in with, just kind of joking. But anyhow, right now Bitcoin came back. Bitcoin's at, I think, as high as 6,300. I think right now it's sitting at 61 and some change. Obviously he's up some money, but yeah, I never like to encourage people to go super heavy on Bitcoin, especially early on, because I realize people aren't used to the volatility, and I would much rather have somebody go small and kind of get used to it and get a feel for the market and then go in heavier, than have somebody go in heavy, see Bitcoin lose 20 or 30% of its value overnight, see them sell for a 20 or 30% loss, and then be like, "This thing's stupid, I can't believe you got me into it." So anyhow, I just thought that was kind of a funny story. $150,000 in the Bitcoin. I don't know if he made any money or not. Like I said, he sat on it for 3 or 4 months and then got nervous and pulled out. Also, he was in GBTC, which is a fund that aims to track Bitcoin. He wasn't actually in Bitcoin itself. But I just thought that was kind of a funny story. Sorry, guys, got a terrible cold. Thought that was a funny story. Thought I'd share it with you guys. If you enjoyed the video, thumbs up, share, subscribe, all that good YouTube jazz, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.